So then my question to you would be, and it's just an open question, I don't want to derail any type of thesis here. How would AI be able to do business model innovation if it's only confined to the things it already know? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the BPM 360 podcast. My name's Caspar, your host. This is episode 76. It's still incredibly hot when we take this. And with me is, as always, my good friend and Russell. Russell, I know you're normally in Hattingen, but how do you call it today, mate?
I call it Hottingen. Hi, Caspar.
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, the temperatures across Europe have really just jumped up. And I said I spent a couple of years in Saudi Arabia, but there it was dry and hot, and it was continuously hot. And this jumping of temperatures, it's something that completely disrupts my system. But I'm inside now. This morning I started off in the garden until I started boiling, and as soon as I heard this whistle, I realized that was my head, and I've moved inside.
That garden shed of yours turns into a sauna automatically with this weather. Oh, bloody hell. We shouldn't do that. But I mean, summer is a nice thing. I can still remember when, like 2 weeks ago, the temperatures were cold, which brings me to winter, which will bring me to our guest, Russell. We have a guest again. And this time we have a special guest, actually. Because for the first time in our 2.5 years of podcasting, we have a student as a guest rather than a seasoned professional. But that will not be any less interesting because of that. So let me introduce our guest. We have today on the show, Michel Kirsch. Michel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be part of the show.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, we're happy to have you on as well. Would you be so kind and explain to our listeners a little bit, who you are? So where you come from, what are you doing, what do you study, and how did you end up in BPM, even at such a young age? And you can explain the winter link I just mentioned as well when you're at it. So let us hear it. Who are you?
Yes, of course. So I'm Michel. I'm 22 years old. I'm currently finishing my studies of international business at the University of Paderborn. It's in Germany, if you're wondering where it is. And I actually came to contact to BPM the first time during the Erz's BPM winter school. This is how I came to contact with the field of BPM. And this is also where this contact to Caspar kind of started to establish, because there I talk with Hayo Reyes, and we are talking about how AI can be implemented into organizations and the role that BPM also plays into this. He had to stand that basically BPM serves as the guardrails to implement BPM effectively. And currently I'm researching for my bachelor thesis. I'm writing about the impact of AI on AI-driven business model innovation. And in this context, I actually asked Hayo again regarding a question. And he forwarded me to you, Caspar. So this is how this connection has appeared. Yeah.
I'll write a nice email to Hayo about that. But no, in all honesty, that's really cool. I like that. So for the listeners, Hayo Reyes is a professor of BPM at the University of Utrecht. We all know him, but not all my listeners, our listeners know that. And I every year I do at least a guest lecture for his curriculum around BPM. And we go back about, I would say, at least 10 years. I just know Russell slightly longer, but Hayo is also is way up there. So that's all good. So you mentioned AI-driven business model innovation and how BPM can support that. Russell, I just see you light up. I mean, this is what you love to talk about.
Yeah, but I see it like a couple of rabbit holes in front of me where we can go down. So maybe we just give Michel the chance to elaborate a bit on what aspects of business innovation does he see relevant, which ones he actually looking at in the context of his studies, because I think there's a lot of like levels of business innovation, and sometimes you see it very much from a communication sales perspective on what you're offering and how you're offering it, and is that like more around that kind of innovation, or is it the deep down recent research and development around technical products, or is it something in the middle, which I see a lot of mid-sized companies in Germany have been working on? Is like, how do we combine or extend our core value proposition and USPs on the market by combining them with services, extending them in certain directions. More this disruptive, but still not completely saying, we're going to selling apples now, but we were renting cars before, but really taking it, extending the service portfolio in a very smart and intelligent manner to up the value creation. So what aspect of business innovation are you actually looking in your thesis, and how then I think we can decide which rabbit hole to go down to see what the impacts are, and also the connector to process management, because I think, let's do a prompt and yes, just innovate our business more. But I think we need to take it more in a structured fashion.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Maybe I can also elaborate a bit on how I actually came to that question. I feel like
Yes.
in the end is maybe connected to the three aspects you talk about, maybe more connected to the first and the last one. So how I came upon that question was that during my thesis research, I came upon a very interesting aspect, and that is that incumbents generally tend to only incrementally change their business models compared to startups, which is the unit that I'm particularly researching in my thesis, which change their business models much more radically. And I think this is an aspect which is quite interesting in the realm of AI. Now, why talking about business models in general? I feel like that AI now is a very powerful new strategic resource, but at the same time, it is also kind of a commodity, because while being very powerful, I mean, nearly everyone has access to that. So in the question of answering how this resource can be used as a competitive advantage, business models serve kind of as a mediator of translating this strategic resource into a competitive advantage. And this is kind of the light where I'm coming from. And this is also the light where this question came upon. And that is that, how does business process management play a role in radically changing the business models of companies? Because I feel like, at least now, elaborating it very provocatively, but taking a look at BPM from a traditional perspective, I feel like it can be affected, it can be quite limiting, where looking at existing processes could be something that could hinder radical business process or business model innovation that may be necessary to sustain as a business in the future when business models are changing due to the AI revolution.
Now that is a very good topic. So let me unfold this. So the business model itself, So everybody says, I've got a business model, I had to disrupt it. But the question is, how well is a business model already, let's say, described in a way that AI can actually even rethink it and extend it? And I think that's one of the core topics. Before I go down that one, just a quick remark on the startups. The startups have a big advantage. They are starting up their greenfield. So they can move very fast in any direction. And so on a startup, I would expect that you can, with a blank canvas, you say, whatever it takes, I want to be able to, and then you formulate your more or less your vision and mission, and it can start generating down what are the aspects that you need from a very basic business model context, because it can start with greenfield. You want to achieve something, and it most probably with some very generic template business model ideas, frameworks. He can start deriving what you need to do to get there, which I think can work really fine. I think what the business model innovation on existing organizations, they really struggle with the existing structures that they already have. And that's where the business model, to be able to digest, reflect, and extend, you have to take a decision on how much of the existing capabilities, but also your limitations, do you want to take in down that path. And that's where I think, and that's where process management in general, in combination, more on a view that we take it, not just this sometimes limiting BPM, we need to do the processes and the activities, but more what end-to-end scenarios do you have, what operating models do you have, what enterprise architecture do you have. A real digital twin of your company is more than just it's then the business model, and rather than and then you have a model, but it's more complete and it's more structured and it's more digestible for AI. So I think that BPM, the way it's often applied, is absolutely limiting. I think AI can help here, but you really have to have a real business model that can be actually, that an AI model can work with, and not just like 2 PowerPoints with a strategy that has nothing to do with the reality. And that's where Hayo comes in where he says, we do process mining. We even measure the way you're working, and there we can talk about optimization. But I think on that level, we're too deep down to really innovate the business, the business model in itself. So you have to find that sweet spot on which areas do you actually want to optimize. Is it just the service portfolio you want to optimize? To first ask the question, what does the customer want? Or is it a level deeper, is how can I combine my current offerings to be able to provide a better value chain, a more efficient or a better offering? So on which level do you actually want to innovate and drive this forward? And I think here there is a lack of a structured approach, specifically in the context of using AI with real business models. So I think what you're heading at is, I would say, spot on.
I feel like one aspect which is also important to consider here is differentiating between adopting or implementing AI into your existing business model and building a new business model around AI. And I feel like what is important to mention here is that generally AI can have a very transformative impact on the whole industry. I also wrote you in a chat like an example of taking a typical software as a service company. Let's say typically a software as a service company creates value by creating software. And the proposition to customers is that software is being created at a lower cost than if the company would build the software themselves. So if we would take a look at this and let's say we try to implement AI into this business model, we would maybe use AI models to write better code to improve the quality of code. But if we now, for example, have a democratization of coding skills with the improvement of models, I mean, just as an example, I'd be building my own applications without much coding knowledge, and we just see these models getting better and better. So if we see a future where companies actually can build their own software, I feel like this is something where the previous value creation of these software as a service companies is fundamentally changed. They cannot create that much value with that process model. And I feel like here we have to differentiate between implementing AI into the existing business model, which may become obsolete in the future, and actually building a new business model around AI with the possibilities of AI evolving in mind.
Okay,
Russell, just allow me I think I got two remarks on that. And then you can add on, Russell, after that. So the first one, if you say we're going to build a business model around AI, then the real question that already pops into my mind is then what now is your core business? Is it now AI and you just take a very specific use case of that, or do you still have a core business? For instance, I'm creating enterprise software that I'm going to sell, and I'm going to leverage a lot of AI to get better at it. So that will be question number one. So I'll leave that to you in a second. Question number two is that in the case of the SaaS companies who create software, I honestly believe that AI will help them create code better and cheaper and more efficient. But that is not where the gist of the value for the customer typically is at. The value that you have as a SaaS company to a customer is, we know what you're going through. We know what you need to do. We've built software for you that helps. And that is based on a lot of industry experience. And that experience is something that is not yet in the realms of AI, I would say. So yes, I agree. There's a lot of vibe coding going on. I'm not convinced yet, but that might be just my opinion, that will replace entire SaaS companies. It will make their life different for sure. That's for sure.
And it's going to change so many aspects, and we've talked about this as well. But I'd just like to differentiate a bit between what we're talking about here, because what I elaborated on was more, how can you use AI to optimize your current and change, maybe even disruptively change your current organization? And that would also include rethinking what you offer and how you offer your services to customers now in the new day and age of AI. Yeah, so AI would help you rethink and let's say remodel your business, taking into consideration that there is a big AI impact now, and you can do a lot of, I would say, elaboration simulations by saying, what if? Yeah, what if a customer can create his own code in, and then you can reflect on, so what is the value of the company now? How do I have to restructure my services around this? Which, say, internal KPIs or targets do I need to set to be able to compensate or to be able to meet these requirements? Yeah. So maybe you have to open up a more open architecture where people can code their own user interfaces, and you just have like the core transactions of your system, like SAP is doing to a certain extent by having a clean core, a BTP, and saying, you need an add-on, build one, integrate it. And for every transaction that runs over the financial core, I open up my hand, and it's a different license model even. Yeah. So I think this rethinking of your business model, I think it impacts so many different, I would say nearly, I don't know any company that isn't impacted. Yeah. I remember there was this one anecdote of a professor asking who believes that they will still have their job won't be touched by AI. And there was some lawyers actually raising their hand because they said, they say, come on, guys, you're the first to be able to be replaced. But not the person who puts down the stamp, not the person who does the final handshake and assures this human level, but their business will be impacted big time. So everybody's impacted. And what I was referring to is that AI can help you and support you in getting to the new, let's say, to your new business model that will be AI oriented, or reflects actually the impact that is coming, which is coming, and to reflect on it fast, but only based on a real solid fundament of context that you need to provide him. And that's where it sounds a bit terrible, but let's say the classic BPM just hasn't been sufficiently thinking in that direction. And again, because they were very limited, because they weren't using with AI. So now we could create BPM models with AI. I could create operating models based on an extract from data from the system. I can provide a much more holistic context of the company, the business model, to AI to rethink and simulate situations that can help me take decisions on moving forward. Now, the other and that's something where we have to then differ, where we're saying, okay, let's just look at what will the disruption be, and how do we really ultimately reshape our business now, knowing that changes are coming. And I think the disruption is much bigger than a lot of people want to see or actually see. So you have certain, and this goes in a bit in this direction of also coding. So there were a lot of software providers that had like a unique selling proposition around having a certain set of capabilities for manipulating pictures, for example, Photoshop. Yeah. And although there was an open source provider of this software, still Adobe would have sold Photoshop as a professional license to so many. And so there are certain applications where now all these filters and capabilities that are built in there that are quite, you need to be a professional to use them. Something like Claude can actually do all these manipulations by itself. And if you code a couple of tools, then you can do it in a professional manner, in a batch manner. So the necessity of certain applications, I think they're just going to dissolve. Yeah. And will they be able to, like, if you have a digital camera, you don't need analog cameras anymore. Market shares go down, but then all of a sudden there's certain special applications where the expertise on generating real manual films is still required, and that's a niche where they can exist. So there's going to be massive shifts around different businesses, service businesses, like consulting business, but also down to the software providers, but any other company as well. So and that's where now coming back to actually your study. So you mentioned this innovation aspect. You innovated, talking about startups as well. But which aspect of that are you really looking at more specific? Because you were talking about startups, and are you looking more of how startups can use AI to start up? Or is it more about you're talking to startups that are originally trying to say, I want an AI first approach, and that's where BPM is limiting you, because it's traditionally not set up for, let's say, thinking around the realms of the AI capability. So is that an aspect that you're looking at? Just elaborate a bit where you're heading up there.
Yeah, totally. So regarding my thesis, I'm primarily writing about the impact that AI has on the components of a business model regarding value creation and value proposition. And here the
Okay.
question is kind of how AI also changes these dynamics. For example, before startups always had this resource constraint, and I feel like AI also changes this dynamic in a way. So the question is a bit how AI or how startups also implement AI differently compared to incumbents. And here's also this thing of legacy issues of incumbents that come into play. And in this context, also this question of BPM arrived because at startups, it's just not that present. So it's a bit the question what role there is for incumbents. And also coming a bit to the point that you mentioned previously, Caspar, you also joked in the chat that now companies will not build their own ERP system. And I think you're right about that. And I feel like this is just I just wanted to give this example as an analogy, how AI can basically change aspects of the business model. And I feel like the issue here with BPM is, of course, we can use it as a context for AI. And I think that's one of the great strength of BPM of operationalizing business models, because in the end, the context is the most important thing determining the quality of the AI output. I just think that it could be problematic relying on what worked in the past to give it as a context to the AI of determining how the future could be. Because this is something that, in my opinion, could fundamentally change with business models changing radically.
So let me just respond to that one, Russell, just real quick, because I think that's an interesting point, Michel, that you touch upon here. Yes, if you think about, if you try to solve a problem the same way you always have thought about it, you will probably never solve it. So that, I think that's where you're going with. If you look at processes and how you've been doing them, that's not automatically a safeguard of being, let's say, radically innovative. The situation around AI always is about the context. And it depends a little bit on the type of industry that you're in, what type of context that you need. And again, even if you're a startup, but especially if you're an incumbent, you need to comply to certain things, whether you want to or not. There is regulation out there, norms, ISO norms, fiscal, legal regulations that you simply need to comply with. And that means that the AI need to know about this. And the best way for an AI to know what it needs to comply with is to document it. And typically BPM is used to document these kind of contexts.
And for a lot of things, not just what to comply with, but also already provide how. So there's certain boring things that startups don't care about, but when they go into scale up, they say, "Oh, we have to do a month-end closing. The tax man is going to close us down," and that would have been quite disruptive because they all have to sit down and do some work that they don't want to do. So I think there's certain aspects of a business that you just want to run, and I think now AI can really help you guide a startup through understanding what has to be done and how it can be done in a highly standardized manner, because that is not differentiating for the business model. So there's this conservative part of a company that you have to do, where I think startups, when they get to a certain level, they have to, reshuffle and they have to rethink because they haven't taken this into consideration at an early stage. Where I think in the combination of process management and AI, they can do that smarter. And what is really important, that's on the BPM perspective, is you have to stay exactly on that level of what and how in general. And they say, yes, there is a standard procedure how to do that, but the details aren't of interest. And if that's your core value, core business process you're looking at, and saying, okay, providing services here, or being able to answer, where you say customer satisfaction depends on this and this, you have your customer journey, then I would say, yes, all the blueprints of detailed processes that existed before, throw them away and think them new. Think the real process completely new, and that's where the detail level of activities. If you want to build your own ERP, you do not want to look at how SAP on a transactional level has actually executed the process in the past. You don't want to look at that. And with their roles, they said, they had a procurement officer. Throw it all away. Let's do AI, a service, pump it in. But the high level of the objective of purchase to pay or order to cash, that's something where you need to sit down and say, what is my business model? What is the chain I need to fulfill? Which compliance steps do I have? Do I have to do GTS? Do I have to do dangerous goods check? Do I have to do a credit check? Nah, who cares about credit checks? Let's streamline the process, throw it out. until you bust because nobody pays the bills. And you can do that. But so on that level, it's fine. But I totally agree. These reference processes on a detail level can be over too much and inhibiting. Totally d'accord.
Michel,
Caspar.
can I ask you a question?
Please, yeah.
And I'm going to be purposefully and intentionally a little bit provocative here. I saw an interview on AI where they interviewed Ben Affleck, the actor, but he's apparently looking into this for a longer. And what he said made me think a little bit. He says, "Listen, AI cannot come up with anything on its own that has not already been discovered or documented in any way, shape, or form. It simply regurgitates and it transforms it, and it maybe reshuffles it, and then it looks to be something new. But basically, philosophically speaking, AI regurgitates what's already there." So then my question to you would be, and it's just an open question, I don't want to derail any type of thesis here. How would AI be able to do business model innovation if it's only confined to the things it already know?
I think in this regard, I feel like maybe there has to be a differentiation in the role that business process management takes also in business model innovation. Because I feel like these aspects, like creating a context layer of the knowledge or giving the AI the context it needs, I feel like these are aspects that are necessary and where BPM plays a very important role in kind of operationalizing the business model in a way. My question is, how do we ensure that we don't keep on improving the processes that may become obsolete in the future? When do we know when we step back from our existing beliefs and the things that we've done that have worked in the past and figure out how they will evolve in the future? And I feel like maybe these are two different things of once having a business model and kind of operationalizing it with BPM, which I think BPM is inevitable because, as you said, you need that context to have a good output from the AI. But the question here, again, for me arises, when do we know when we step back and from the existing beliefs, and how do we ensure that the processes that we are improving won't become obsolete? Like in the example of, okay, we have image manipulation software or something like this. And the question is if this even will be there in the future when AI is disrupting the whole value creation of that.
Yeah. That's interesting. And Russell, allow me, I want to hear your opinion as well. But at the moment that you say, I have a business model and that contains, among other things, about business processes that you do, regardless if we're talking about an incumbent or a startup, eventually what they do is they execute processes. In the case of a startup, they're typically more flexible and more ad hoc and more unstructured. And in incumbent organizations, large organizations, they're typically much more structured and streamlined. At the moment that you say, how do I know when I need to step away from the current way of working and do something new? Then the one thing that the AI needs to know if it wants to be successful in helping you with that is, what are the boundaries that I cannot go across, that I cannot go outside of? Because there are legal and fiscal frameworks for almost everything in the world right now, even in a relatively simple field. And no offense to all my procurement people out there in the world, but procurement is it's not rocket science. It's a very much a human field about negotiations and being clever about it. But process-wise, it's not very overly complex. I've been in it for 10 years. I should know. But if you want to radically innovate on that, then the AI can help you by exploring new avenues, I think. And it should probably be very good in saying, all right, so where do you want to go? How do you think about this? And ask a lot of good questions. But it will also need to know, what kind of legal boundaries do I need to stay within? Because it doesn't make any sense if an AI helps you develop a business model that's illegal, just to explore one rabbit hole. Russell, Michel, just before you continue, Russell, how do you look at that?
Well, I think that ultimately the companies now looking at, say, this question of how we're going to be impacted, how do we react? And I think generally that's a question everybody in whatever different position is currently asking themselves this question. And do I believe that business process management really helps me here? I would answer not really, other than giving the context of my current capabilities and to a certain extent also my limitations and maybe my compliance guardrails of what my existing setup is. But the methods to really think things new, and I'm with you, Caspar. Everything has been. Oh no, I'm not quite with you. You said but AI cannot think things new, but there's so many citations that say everything has been thought before. Yeah, so how many people that we've said, "Oh, that's innovative," and then it's Rocky 2. So you see Rocky 2, you go, "Wow, that's really good," but actually it's just Rocky 1, and Rocky 1 is actually just the same as a film in the 50s. So music is a copy and an adaptation. It's a mix and max, and so where is real superlative? Really, even Einstein was saying, well, actually, he just opened up the door that was logical to open up, and then after that, everybody else jumped. And it was more like a collaborative work of a lot of scientists, but he just did this one step that he's a very humble guy, I know. But coming back to that, so there are methods where you say flip the value chain, extreme constraint thinking, borrow and remix models. And there's a lot of methodologies on helping companies to say reflect and question where they are and how to make the best out of it under new constraints, and that's in setting up, and that's why I said scenarios and accelerating and guiding you through this process. AI again is a super tool to help you do that, but the methodologies AI didn't invent; they're existing. Yeah, and that's why I think there's a lot of need for demand for let's say strategy companies to help companies really rethink their business models new. Startups have an easier starting base because they have a greenfield, so they don't have to take into the consideration that they have 5,000 employees that they do not all want to just fire because they want to change the business model. So this is where I think we have to, but ultimately, coming back to the original question, which role does BPM play here? I think on the very detail level, it can be more inhibiting than really helping, because it's not really helping you radically rethinking your, how you want to do business. It does give a clear context of what your current capabilities are, your, let's say, the must-haves, or due to compliance reason, the basic set of also representing your operating model, what you currently have as assets, which you can or cannot, you don't have to, but you can take this into the equation when rethinking your strategy on business model. But here I think you need to take up a whole different approach, which is much more around 360 design thinking and whatever, to really look at that. And how do you combine these two and bring in the AI aspect? So my question is more in your direction. Which of these, let's say, business model innovation methodologies have you looked at, and how far do you see that they take in a structured manner /BPM the context, capabilities, and guardrails into consideration, and how far are they fit to purpose in the context of AI? Not just using AI, but which ones of them do you think would really help businesses react to the impact of AI to their business? Well, have you looked into that?
I've not looked into that yet, I have to say. So I don't know what I can contribute to that factor now.
But do you think it's a good idea?
I think it's a very good idea.
So that's why you got something for your master thesis then, just,
yeah.
So we just wrap this up, this bachelor, and then we've got a whole bunch of ideas to take this further. But no, but seriously, actually talking to you, that really is I think that's something originally questionable. Everybody must be going through this like simulation, rethinking their current business model. So that's where you are spot on with what you're actually looking at. But what, let's say, methods are currently applied, which ones really work, and in how far can you, let's say, tweak them to be even better suitable in the context of we have a clear situation. We have a given business? How do you describe that? Which level of business model do you need to feed it into this like method to be able to come up to answers? Or do you leave it completely out? And what part of AI do you need to feed in to be able to simulate or find out which radical disruption you should consider following, because it'll have that positive or negative or even mitigating impact on your business. And that would be a fantastic tool.
Yeah, true. It could be a very interesting topic as well. Then also maybe the question is also what information, like Caspar, we were talking about that before, that you are taking, for example, information about regulations and all these aspects. They have to be considered when coming up with a new business model. I feel like in this regard, the question also is though, what information you want to give to the AI and how much information of your existing business model you want to take into that. Because I feel like this is also something which can change. Also regulations can change in this regard.
Yeah, of course. It's an interesting point. And I think there's a difference here in how and what do you want to use AI for. So if you're an incumbent and you want to make your businesses and your processes more efficient, then you try to feed as much as possible information into a context model. If you want to look for radical innovation, then I think I agree with Russell. Try not to put too much in because it will be restricting, of course. On the other hand, yes, regulations will change, and you're not a future a paragnost, somebody who predicts the future. That's what I was looking for. So you don't know when and how they're going to change. So that is something that, of course, AI can keep tabs on that. They can see, listen, these are the regulations that are applicable for your business. Even if you're a startup, you are a startup in a certain industry, and every industry has a set of regulations that they need to abide by and comply with. So you can use AI on the one hand to make sure that they keep track on the current regulations, and you can also leverage to see where do we still have, let's say a gap, not a gap in regulation. I'm not trying to put you onto an illegal path here. But of course there are gaps where not a lot of companies have gone yet. And that might be much more of a form of a radical innovation. Say, okay, we're in this industry. Have we thought about doing that and this? And then, yeah, AI can help there, but then I don't think you need to feed it with too much information other than what's bare necessary.
Yeah, and concerning, I think there's two approaches that you see on the market, and the America is the let's just go forward and deal with regulation later, and trade off between what we have to pay on fines versus what we gain on market share. So speed is everything. I think the European way is different, and we had your friend on the with the crypto what's he called?
Oh,
on the
yeah,
show.
Jan. Yeah, another Jan.
And he was saying, the European way is to really embrace compliance. And that means that it can become an opportunity if you, in an early stage, are clear about taking certain compliance frameworks into consideration. And again, here it's yes, the regulations will change, but in their inherent idea that they have, it'll be a guideline. And if you are willing to be open to take this into consideration in your design without without just being scared and negative about the whole thing. So it's not even worth it. Compliance is going to shut us down. But taking it more let's embrace it. Let's look at what is actually important about this. It's communicated. You will get backup from European customers because you're compliant with it. At some time, you may even have American customers because they see this as an opportunity to have more data safety. So I think I would really recommend the European way. And not being, and that's something Jan super impressed me there. And it said, coming from that, a line of innovative business, and then saying, hey, compliance and regulations are good, and we just need to embrace them, work with them. And then on the detail level, if something changes, then you have to see how it impacts you. But typically, you know which direction it's going, what it is important to take care of. Don't do anything stupid with the data of your customers. Don't do anything with the data of customers you wouldn't want others to do with your data. Yeah. So it's like the common thing the common question you should always ask yourself in all matters of life, and in data, it's the same. So come on, and that's something where I think that could be an opportunity. So I would expect that in these frameworks where you question and you look at your current capabilities, but also your compliance, your guardrails, that you just take it with you and see where you land. And I don't think it'll be so negatively disruptive that you come to a complete standstill. There will be some crazy, let's say not crazy, but say, hey, if you had this and this data, you could, if I had all the data of the human beings, I could blackmail anybody. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a business model.
It's a new business model, yeah.
Let's
seen
just
that being played
harvest
out.
the whole WhatsApp and then open up a cybercrime company. Yeah, that could be a fantastic business model, but maybe it's just not the best thing to do. Yeah. But so actually being told, that's maybe going too far. Not bad. Come on, I mean, stop you in your heels before you go down some super crazy rabbit hole. And yes, maybe other cultures they
really
come up,
going off
they
the cliff
use
now,
AI
Russell.
to come up with a business model. It says become a cyber criminal. It's the best time. Get Code Fable, Crackle, and then start blackmailing the banks. And it's an easy deal. You have a return of invest of 1 hour. No, just coming back
Russell,
from the jokes. Yes?
That rabbit hole went so deep, you came up above ground in New Zealand again. Bloody hell. Anyway, maybe good to get this back on track.
Let's get back
Michel,
to
I think
Germany.
we got room for one more question, if you have it, or a little topic, because we're getting towards the end of the show today. But is there anything that you're dying to know, or you really want to get into this episode?
Yes, I have one more question, which is on my mind.
Oh, go ahead.
First of all, I want to say that with this aspect that we need kind of context knowledge also in regards to compliance, I'm agreeing with you all. I think in this case also BPM can play a very important role in taking this knowledge to in order to apply with this compliance. Another question that was coming up for me though was kind of this psychological effect that BPM has on the people that take decisions. Because I feel like generally in strategic management, there's often this issue of preferring exploitation in comparison to exploration. I feel like this is an issue which is generally present in strategic management. And in this regard, I was wondering if BPM or what effect BPM also have on that, because I feel like it could maybe nudge the management a bit more towards exploitation actually, because in the way that, for example, process mining is providing you with the transparency and the facts that allows also for maybe incremental innovation. We have clear data on, okay, this is the time we need for that process. This is how we can improve it. And in comparison, I feel like there is maybe a lack of data, which is comparable in the context of exploration. And this was just like one thing I was also wondering about the psychological effect that having this data could also have in maybe nudging managers a bit more towards exploitation in comparison to exploration. Or what do y'all think about that?
Wow. That's no, what I really like about this is, and I can put this in context too, and I hope Caspar disagrees, that I would agree that the this comes down back to the business model aspect we said. So do you need to become innovative, explorative? Do you want to look at the details at that level of detail as process mining provides? And that goes exactly in the same direction of exploitation. It's suggesting that you have now control over the detail level, and the value that you then can see there, the potentials you see there, you're, let's say, optimizing, let's say the exploiting the last 5% that is of potential there in your process, without saying fundamentally, if I switch the blocks on the top, I will have 100% because I'm opening up a new market, which would be the more exploitative approach. So you're going down to the level of doing not local optimization, but you're doing very fine tuning on your existing process models without creating the space for exploring, is there a bigger picture behind how we can get our value chain? And I'm talking more value chain now than a real business model, but exploring different ways of doing business and offering different ways of servicing our customers. And that, again, BPM has the answer there, because principally in a process architecture, you are looking at the end-to-end scenarios as well, and the operating model. So if you do BPM properly, where you have not just like this detail level of all the data on the ultimate, for really exploiting and optimizing on a very fine granular operative level, real time, but you also have the means in the architecture to look at the value chains, the end-to-end scenarios, the overarching concepts that you've implemented, how you've operationalized your strategy and your operating model with your entities. And that's the baseline where you can talk explorative rethinking of how you serve your current business model. It doesn't help you really optimize your business model, but your operating model and the value chains behind it. So BPM has different layers, and exploring is on that top level. And I'm with you, certain tools are more on a detail level. And what we very much follow with management is talking about that explorative level. Yeah, and because that's where I think everybody's doing a really good job, but they're not working together well as a team. And they're not all following one objective. So there's a lot of friction between departments and between organizational entities. And by going 2 level down to the data, you're tweaking little things without having a view on the big picture. And process management is actually about creating a big picture. And process mining can help you get a good picture, a good high level picture, but the data also allows you to just dive deep into one little push. Why is that package not being delivered? How do we have to optimize this commissioning site in Orlando? And that's I think that's not really using it properly. And BPM has the means there. Are they used properly? Are they propagated? No. I'm sure that there's a lot of potential for companies to use that better.
So,
Caspar.
yeah, you started your sentence with, I hope Caspar disagrees, or you think I disagree. So do I disagree with this? I think the Germans would say "jein" in my best German.
That's a good one. Yeah, that was
very
that
good.
was good, wasn't it? So yes and no. I don't disagree with the things you say, Russell, because that hardly ever happens, unfortunately. But we need to do that more. But I think where I walk slightly different path is, I think, because what you're describing is basically operational excellence on one hand and innovation on the other hand, and those two things are not mutually exclusive. It's not one or the other. You need both. You need, on an operational level, you need to be able to say, I need to continuously improve my processes because that basically safeguards my bottom line results. On the other hand, and you do that less often but more radically, where can we actually innovate this process so that it becomes that we do a big step up in the performance of the process rather than incremental little improvements. And I think you need both. And you can use AI for both. And you typically see tools like process mining being used, of course, in the operational excellence part more than on the radical innovation part, because you need different kinds of information. Process intelligence tools give you a lot of insight in how processes are actually executed, and they bring so much added value, but always typically from an operational excellence point of view, and not as much from an innovation point of view, because you're looking at a much more aggregated picture, I would say. And when you talk about an aggregated picture, there's a lot of other things that immediately pop up and they knock on the door and say, hey, listen, you need to think about us as well. And that's a bit more difficult. And AI might even help there a little bit more by helping you and guiding you in what are the different aspects around this innovation that I need to think about. Because ultimately, I still believe for the next coming years, major innovation comes from the gray mass between our ears, not from the CPUs created on a template from ASML. Just want to get that in. By the way, before we end up, I do see a Dutch connection with Michel as well, because you have a Vincent van Gogh on the wall behind you. That was a Dutch painter.
Yes,
There you
it's
go.
not the original, but
No,
Oh,
but
well.
that would have been cool if that was
Yeah,
original. Because I think I recognized the painting. But anyway, we need to wrap this up. As much as I always hate to wrap it up, because this is a very interesting conversation. I think this was actually a very interesting conversation, Michel. Did you enjoy it? How did you like it?
Oh, I
It's the first
enjoyed
time
it
we have
very
a
much.
student here, so
Yeah, so I was thinking it was a bit like, there's this one, I think I'm talking about Rocky, isn't it Rocky, where there's a world champion that actually has then an open fight where you can, where he gets somebody in who's not really as a professional. So there was a bit of that situation here as well. But we don't, I hope it wasn't so much of a battle like Rocky Balboa coming into the ring, but, and you were preparing before, there's, I'm going to have the episode with the two world champions of BPM podcasting. And so I see you running up Paderborn, up the Domkirche,
Yes,
whatever.
yeah.
Getting ready for this episode. No, I hope it wasn't. No.
I know what tune to take for this episode.
Exactly. But from the idea, I think it's really good because there's so many aspects you brought in where I said, wow, that's really cool. I need to, and that you used one term, and I was just on this seminar yesterday, and somebody used it as well. It's nudging. And nudging as like a technique and a lot of literature and that as well. That's something I really want to introduce into BPM as well, just to help people in the transformation of their, when they need to go from A to B, is you can just say, put down the design, do a training and tell them to do it, or you can get them there by nudging. So nudging is a big topic I want to also dig down soon. But around the business model and rethinking that and how far BPM is limiting here, there's some really cool aspects. So and say as soon as you have your bachelor ready, then just send it round. Yeah, we'll read it and give you marks if you want to.
Thank you all so much. No, thank you all so much
brilliant.
again also for having me here on the show. It was a real pleasure also to hear your thoughts about it. Also regarding this aspect. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just one final thing around this aspect of nudging. I was also thinking about this coming from a psychological side where I thought that maybe one issue is that exploration is a bit difficult to measure. So implementing maybe ways in order to measure exploration, also to implement KPIs in order to measure that. I thought that was also an interesting aspect. It's just something that came to my mind right now. But thank you all so much again for having me. Again, it was a
pleasure. Stay in touch, definitely.
The pleasure was all ours. Russell, I just got an idea for a second podcast. We'll call it the Nudge Masters. There you go. Because everybody in the world is being nudged all day long, subliminal or very directly by all kinds of companies that want to make money out of you. But anyway, thank you very much, Michel, for taking the time out of your busy study to get hang out with two old geezers like Russell and myself. We enjoyed it for sure. I want to thank all the listeners as well for sticking with us for another episode, and we'll see you in the next week. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.
Bye.